Are we about to have breaking
I don't
news?
know.
Is there a God?
Okay, so I will tell you is that there are a lot of unknowns in the universe, but just because there are unknowns does not mean there's a deity. As we've seen in the history of civilization, outright warfare and bloodshed and death. So in a pluralistic society, your personal truths really need to be kept to yourself.
I'm talking to arguably the most popular scientist in the universe ever, Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson, whose new book, just to do a bit of media sensationalism there, Neil, his new book, To Infinity and Beyond, is out this month. It's absolutely riveting. You write about this stuff so brilliantly. You bring it all so alive. I want to go into a few things. But first of all, the key question for me with all this, especially when I was reading your book, how much do you think we know and how much do you think we don't know about what's out there?
That's a great question, and I can actually quantify that answer. So there are these things, there's dark matter you might have heard about. So dark matter is 85%, it's responsible for 85% of the gravity in the universe, and we have no idea what it is, but we can measure it. There's dark energy responsible for the accelerated expansion of the universe. We can measure that, but we don't know what's causing it. And then you add up all of these sort of what these forces are doing in the universe, it's 96% of what's driving the universe. And all the forces of nature that we know and love, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, life, chemistry, biology, physics, that's in 4% of the universe. So we know enough about the universe to quantify our ignorance. So we know 4% of what's going on out there. But also keep in mind that as the area of our knowledge grows, so too does the perimeter of our ignorance. And that is the very soul of science. That there are questions, people say, what questions do you want answered? Yeah, I don't think that way. I think, what question do I not even yet know to ask?
I think that's the really interesting part, is that you're probably not even thinking of the great question, right? Because there may be something
correct. I lose sleep over that, yes.
Now, I know you're an avowed atheist. How can you be so certain that there is no supernatural, godlike entity out there, given that we know so little?
Well, first, I don't count myself among the ranks of avowed atheists. And I'll give a fast example why. A friend of mine went up to fix the Hubble telescope, okay, on the space shuttle. And on my Facebook feed, I said, Godspeed to the space shuttle astronauts. And then in the comment thread, it said, I thought you were an atheist. How could you possibly say that? And so the fact that I gleefully said that and atheists complained about it, clearly I'm not an atheist. Okay?
What are you?
My favorite Broadway musical of all time is Jesus Christ Superstar, which I saw in real time in New York City. I don't know that atheists can, so I don't.
So is there a God then, Neil deGrasse Tyson? Are we about to have breaking news?
I don't know.
Is there a God?
Okay, so what I will tell you is that there are a lot of unknowns in the universe, but just because there are unknowns does not mean there's a deity in the unknown. If you're going to assign a deity to that which... It doesn't mean there isn't, that's correct.
So you're more of an open mind about this, right?
Everyone should. If the unknown is the unknown. But the track record of people saying, God is behind this, and then you add a little science to it and you find out, no, we can completely explain it and control it, then the history of that exercise is so rich with science discovering the unknowns that were previously ascribed to deity, like lightning bolts and weather systems. There was Poseidon, there was Zeus, there was, just look at the history of this. I'm not given reason to say, we're gonna find something, God is gonna be at the center of that, and there'll be no science to apply. I'm gonna look for the science first, because that's how the history of this exercise has unfolded.
Now, I wanna play you a clip. This is you talking to Joe Rogan about vegans.
If you want to save animals, I've never seen anyone say, save the leeches.
No, no one cares about bugs.
Save the ticks. And you can ask, if you're really into animals and don't want to kill them, if you heard that ticks were endangered, would you start a movement to protect ticks? Would you do that? And
if you would, more power to you. But I'm thinking you're not.
They're not. It's the little guys they don't care about. I've had this debate with vegans. I had one last week. I have it every month. And I always point out, most vegans I know munch away on almonds and avocados, and they turn a blind eye to the fact that this causes the mass murder of billions of bees, mainly in California. They don't want to have that debate because they don't care about the little guys, Neil.
History shows a clear pattern. Natural events were once explained through gods. Lightning, disease, planetary motion, all attributed to divine action. Science replaced those ideas with measurable explanations. Electricity explains lightning. Germ theory explains disease. Physics explains planetary motion. There are no verified cases where a supernatural claim has been proven through evidence or testing. Every confirmed discovery has moved in the opposite direction, from belief to data. Modern science continues that trend. The cosmic microwave background supports the Big Bang through direct measurement. Gravitational lensing shows the presence of unseen mass affecting light, confirming dark matter through observation. These are repeatable and independently verified. Religious texts describe natural control by a deity. Psalm 147:8 says clouds and rain are directed by God. Atmospheric science explains weather through pressure systems, temperature gradients, and fluid dynamics.
My only reaction there is that comment was addressing only vegans who are vegans because they don't want to kill animals.
Yes, no, I agree.
Other reasons to be vegan.
Of course.
For health or the environment.
No, I'm talking
but
specifically
those who didn't want to kill...
The ones who run into steakhouses playing sounds of cows being slaughtered, they're the ones that munch avocados and almonds, invariably.
Yeah, and by the way, and they are dining upon the reproductive organs of plants. That's
Yes.
kind of weird. And I imagine if a plant-based alien visited Earth, they would freak out when they saw vegetarians.
Yes.
Because the vegetarians would be eating them, right? And vegetarians target not only the reproductive organs, the nuts, the berries, the flowers, but they also target the infant versions of it, with baby lettuce, baby carrots, baby.
Oh my
this
God.
would terrify a plant-based alien. So that's just a cosmic perspective on that.
No,
diet.
you have given me a whole new line of attack. The flower babies. I love it. This is fantastic. I find these.
That's dangerous. If it's dangerous to feed you more lines of attack, because I don't know what you're going to do with it.
No, but I always like to take these things to their debates to their logical end, right? I mean, and it seems to me when it suits them, they care about the bigger animals, the cuddly ones. But when it comes to the little guys, they're not interested. Now, I want to talk about
the furry ones especially.
Something even more iconic, actually, than God or vegans, and it's your moustache, which has become one of the world's most famous moustaches. And here's extraordinary. There's a whole website that's been set up called deGrasse Tyson's Moustache. And we did a bit of research ourselves, a bit of scientific research. And there's a moustache montage that we have here, which is quite extraordinary. It turns out almost every brilliant scientist has had a magnificent tash. Nikola Tesla, the inventor extraordinaire, great tash. Louis de Broglie, discovered the wave-like nature of all matter, great tash. Hans Geiger, famous for the Geiger counter. Robert H. Goddard built the first liquid-fueled rocket. And, of course, Albert Einstein, probably the one nearest to your own. You've become the modern-day godfather of science moustaches, but very much running in a sort of a great, long, historic list of great tashes.
I never thought about it. This mustache, I've never shaved it in my life. Yes, I've trimmed it, but it's ever since I could grow a mustache, I've had a mustache. So it's just part of my life. And even it was kind of out of style a few years ago. And I was a little bit, I did get rid of my mutton chop sideburns. I figured, okay, that's from 1978. I could lose those. But I did keep the mustache. But if I were to vote among those mustaches,
Yes.
I would say, we remember Einstein as this wire-haired,
Yes.
gray, big bushy eyebrows. But he was a dashing young man.
He
You
was.
see him in a tuxedo. Yes, look at that mustache. That's like a Magnum PI mustache right there.
If you could, final question, Neil. If you could have dinner tonight with any scientist in the history of recorded mankind, who would it be?
Yeah, it would be, oh, no question about it, Isaac Newton. But I think about that all the time, and I'd say, Isaac, come for dinner. And he'd look out the window, and he'd see these things moving. He said, what are those? And I'd say, well, they're horse-drawn carriages without a horse. He said, well, how do they move? Well, they use gasoline. What's gasoline? Oh, it's fossil fuels. What's fossil fuels? And after 5 minutes of this, I say, go back to where you came from.
Also, unfortunately, your
because
answer...
there's so much that has happened since then.
Well, your answer is completely...
I don't know if I have the patience.
Well, you killed my theory also, because Isaac Newton famously was clean-shaven.
Oh, well, Newton, we see him with these big locks of curls, but I think that was actually a wig on top of much shorter hair. And the statue of him in Cambridge, in Trinity Church in Cambridge, you see him with short hair.
Wow.
So I was so disappointed when I heard of that, yeah.
Neil, I could honestly interview you every single day and it would never get boring. You've got a fantastic way of bringing this stuff to life. To Infinity and Beyond, a journey of cosmic discovery. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Lindsay Walker. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, as all your books are. It's a fantastic read and great to have you back on Uncensored. Thank you.
Instead of engaging with the substance, Piers leans into jokes and side comments. Personally, that doesn't land well. Tyson is giving structured, logical arguments backed by science, and the response turns into mockery. Look at Tyson's reasoning style. He tests ideas by pushing them to their logical limits. That's standard in science and philosophy. Reductio ad absurdum is used to expose inconsistency. His point about selective concern is about inconsistency in reasoning, not about attacking people. Meanwhile, the scientific method remains clear. Claims require evidence, testing, and repeatability. Tyson stays inside that framework the entire time. No appeals to authority, no emotional claims, just logic and evidence.
So in the chapter Truth and Beauty, I spent a fair amount of time evaluating what the meaning of truth is, especially as different people interpret it. And one branch of that would be a personal truth, let's say. And this is like, let's say, Jesus is your savior, right? In a free country where we have freedom of religious expression, no one is going to take that from you. That's a personal truth. But if you want to have other people agree with that truth, and they might have a different savior or a different religious tradition, then it will require some serious act of persuasion, but in the limit, as we've seen in the history of civilization, outright warfare and bloodshed and death. So in a pluralistic society, your personal truths really need to be kept to yourself, or casually attempting to influence others. But then there's another kind of truth which our brain is susceptible to. If you repeat something over and over, your brain natively says, it must be true. And once you reach that point, you lose all curiosity to unravel whether or not it isn't true. Okay, you don't go back to it, you just accept it. And what the internet has done, especially social media, has become the world's greatest propaganda machine. If Hitler had access to to social media, no telling what would have happened to the world at the time. All right, so propaganda is one of these things where somebody's trying to influence you in a surreptitious way, and then you end up fully agreeing without you even having consciously done so. And that's dangerous. There's the other kind of truth, an objective truth, where the methods and tools of science are exquisitely tuned to distinguish that which is true and that which is not. And how does that happen? I just say to you, here's some tools. Use them in whatever way you can to make sure you don't conclude that something is true that is not, or that something is not true that is. And when you do that, you are an independent thinker and you're no longer susceptible to any of that.
When you have a leader like Donald Trump, who was, very popular and divisive in equal measure as president of the United States, but when he could look at the sky when it was blue and say it's grey, and a lot of his supporters would then think it's grey because he had such a hold over them, how dangerous is that?
Yeah, so what happens is if you're in a democracy, if the electorate, in a democracy, you expect there some power of sway that is, given to those with personality, all right, with charisma. All right, President Kennedy had a bit of a charisma about him. So you kind of expect that. You even want a little bit of that. I don't have a problem with this. We don't put people into the presidency based on their resume. If we did, half the presidents that were voted in would have never become presidents. They're voted in because there's something about them that you like, that you like their panache, their attitude, their, one of my favorite quotes from Harry Truman, just coming out of the Second World War, his moniker was, "Give him hell, Harry," right? And they say, "Mr. President, why are you always giving people hell?" And you know his response was, "No, I tell them the truth. They think it's hell." So he was an honest guy. So I think it's okay to like someone on a personal level. People said of George W. Bush that, you know, my issue with him was that he couldn't pronounce the word nuclear, yet he had access to nuclear codes. So as a physicist, that was a little worrisome. But people said you can have a beer with him. And I spent a little bit of time in that Bush White House. And one time we made eye contact, and I felt like I'd known him my whole life. There was some extra chemistry there. And I see that, and I understand how politicians can rise because of it. But at some point, they cannot be the total source of your knowledge and your enlightenment and your wisdom, because you're an individual. And especially in the American documents, there's probably at least some of this in other Western world democracies, but certainly the American documents, it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's our government. It's not the leader's government. And we can forget that after a while. We can say, I want the leader to make all decisions for me. Then what are you? Then you're a follower, but it's the leader who actually should be following you. In a democracy, even in a republic, where you have someone in between you and the top dog. So it was a problem that his cult of following was so potent that people would lose sight of what is true and what is not, because they would just follow whatever he said. That's just, at the end of the day, dangerous.
You made a very good point in the book that there are not many people left alive who probably remember what it was like to actually endure Nazism, for example, fascism at its worst. And that because of that, when it comes round again in the way that we're seeing now in certain parts of the world, people don't really understand the danger or how bad it can get very quickly.
I just suggested that might be a cause, because like you just said, not just signs of it in the United States, but many other parts in the world, there are leaders that are rising up where their personality and their charisma to their followers is bigger than any analysis of objective truths that should be behind the decisions that are getting made. And once you control the public, your electorate at that level, then they're putty in your hands. So I hate to be so cynical, but the last person a politician wants is somebody who can completely think for themselves. It means they're not susceptible to, and by the way, I'm not even blaming politicians, because why do politicians lie? Because they're telling us what we want to hear.
Right.
Because we know if they told us the truth, we wouldn't vote for them. So politicians, I think, are a symptom of the public's, of the state of the public, not the other way around.
Let's take a short break again.
And by the way, why are you listening to an astrophysicist say all this? Because I study science and how the world works,
right,
and the causes and effects of decisions that are made. And what do they look like statistically, probabilistically? How do you classify ideas? How do you test ideas for whether or not they're going to work? All of that analysis can apply to the universe, and it can apply to everyday life. And that's kind of what drove the inspiration of the book.
Right, and of course, science, it should be applied historically. So you can say, look, we can learn from what we did wrong on this occasion and not do it wrong again. But too often we fall into the I think it was an apocryphal Einstein quote, actually, but the quote about the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Exactly. Yeah, it's attributed to Einstein for sure.
Neil is drawing a line between personal belief and real-world consequences, and history backs him up. When beliefs are pushed as absolute truth and forced onto others, it has led to violence. Europe went through centuries of religious wars, including the 30 Years' War, where millions died over competing Christian doctrines. Even in more recent history, religion has been used alongside power to control people. Nazi Germany had strong ties to Christian identity. Hitler publicly aligned himself with Christianity and used it to unify the population. The phrase Gott mit uns, God with us, was stamped on Nazi soldiers' belts. Churches in Germany were pressured to support the regime or stay silent. Tyson's warning about repeated ideas becoming accepted truth connects directly to propaganda. When people stop questioning and just follow authority, history shows how quickly things escalate. The Bible itself demands belief and obedience, like John 14:6, where one path is declared as the only truth. That kind of exclusivity has fueled division for centuries. So here's the question. When beliefs are repeated enough and accepted without evidence, where does that lead us? Should religious claims be treated the same as scientific claims and be questioned, tested, and challenged? Comment your thoughts below. Like the video and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.